In this episode, we'll talk about adding our database of questions to our app. Since we want to keep things simple and don't have a fancy cloud database for our app yet, the questions have been hard-coded into main activity. Now, this isn't best practice for apps that you'll release on the App Store, but for now, this shall do. Also, that way I can save you a lot of typing by including the code in the stub. At the top of the main activity.java file, you'll see a block of code that's currently commented out. This is our database of questions. Select all the commented code and go to Code, Comment with Line Comment. And you should see all the slashes disappear, and Android Studio now recognizing this as Java code. Now let's take a closer look at it. Here we've created a new array called mQuestionBank. This array is our collection of all the quiz questions and their respective answers. You can always tell that you're dealing with an array in Java when you see the square bracket syntax. Remember, the syntax for creating an array is actually fairly straightforward. To create an array of integers, you simply write int square brackets, then the name of the array, equals new int square brackets, and then in the curly brackets you have the elements in the array. And this is exactly what we're doing with the true-false. So this array has a total of 3 elements. There are 3 whole numbers in this collection. Looking at the mQuestionBank, we see that instead of storing whole numbers, we are storing true-false questions. In fact, we are creating the true-false objects at the same time that we are creating the array. We are calling the true-false constructor a total of 13 times. Each time we write new, true-false, we provide a resource ID for the question text as well as the correct answer. So the correct answer for the first 5 questions is in fact true. And then for the 6th question, the correct answer is false. You can see how this code is making heavy use of our model that we created in the last video. Okay, so now that it's clear how we've created an array of questions, let's talk about how we display them on screen. For that, we need to take a look at our layout file. There we see a text view with ID question_text_view. This is where we want the question text to show up. Let's follow the same pattern that we have with the buttons. First, let's create a member variable for the text view called mQuestionTextView. And then let's call our old friend findViewById to fetch the text view from the layout file and store it in mQuestionTextView. Next, we need to figure out how to display something in our text view. How do we do this? If we look at the documentation, we see that the text view has a special ability. We can use the setText method and provide the text to display as a parameter. Let's try that now. Now let's run the app. What you might expect is to see the Valentine's Day question being displayed when you start the app, because that's what you see in the layout. However, because this Java code is executed right away when the app fires up, we should see our question text view display birds or dinosaurs instead. And this indeed is the case. Okay, so now that we've set the text on the text view, how do we display the questions from our question bank? Namely the questions that we stored in all the 13 true-false objects. First, we have to get these questions out of the question bank. And the way you get something out of an array is by its index. If we wanted to extract the first element of the myInt array, we would simply write something like this. myInt array square brackets 0. This gives us the first element, the number 2. If we wanted to get the second element, we would write myInt array square brackets 1. And this would give us the number 4. So with that in mind, let's create a variable called mindex to track which question we want to fetch from the question bank. You can think of mindex as tracking which question the user is on. Also note that mindex starts its life with a default value of 0. Therefore, we can create a variable containing the first question like this. The type is true/false, the name is first question, and we set that equal to mQuestionBank square bracket mindex. Now remember, we didn't store the question text as a string of characters. We stored it as a resource ID using something like r.string.question1. We also used Android Studio to auto-generate some code for us when we created the true/false class. One of the methods that we generated was called getQuestionID. And getQuestionID returns to us the resource ID pointing to the question text. So we can now call getQuestionID on the first question to get the resource ID that points directly to the question text for question 1. We can store this resource ID in a variable called question, which we can create by typing int question is equal to first question dot get question ID. Then we can use that question variable inside setText instead of birds are dinosaurs. And the reason we can do this is because the setText method accepts both a string of characters as well as resource IDs, which you can clearly see here in the documentation. Okay, so things are getting a little bit messy, so let's tidy up a bit. First off, we don't need all that example code that I put in, so I'm going to get rid of the array of integers. Second of all, we actually don't need to create a separate variable called first question. We can simply take mQuestionBank square brackets index and substitute it for first question here. So now the variable first question turns gray, and Android Studio informs us that first question is never used. So let's delete this line. Now the first part of this code fetches the true-false object at the value of mindex. The value of mindex at the moment is 0, so it fetches the first true-false object in the array. And the second part calls getQuestionID on the true-false object that we just fetched. You can see how chaining this code together is very similar to what we did with calling .show on the toast message. And now we're going to modify that question variable. At the moment, the question variable only lives inside the onCreate method, but we'll be adding other methods to our code soon. So let's create a new member variable called mQuestion. Now we can replace the local question variable with the mQuestion member variable. Lastly, let's tidy up the listener on the mTrue button, because we don't really need this extra myListener variable floating around. Let's follow the same pattern as with the anonymous listener on the mFalse button. Great, that's all the tidying up we need to do for now. In the next video, I'll show you how to go to the next question when we tap one of the buttons on the screen. I'll see you there.